welcome to the No Spin News, Monday, November 30th, 2020. Stand up for your country. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice break. I did, but I worked a lot, and I was digging into the election. Got a little time on my hands, and I'm as disturbed as anyone about what happened in the November 3rd vote. I'd like to know the truth, and I think you would too. But a caution here, sometimes the truth hurts. And we're going to give you what we know, and then we're going to stair-step it each day. We'll add to the facts. And by, I don't know, Christmas time, you should have a pretty good idea of what did or did not happen, so you'll know. And that's what we need in our republic. And I'm not fooling around here. I don't care what side it's on. I'm going to tell you the truth. Now, pen and paper, always a good thing to have when listening to the No Spin News. So we're going to give you very specific facts. So first of all, you can't get the truth from either side. So the Biden people, the Democrats, they don't want to know if there's election fraud. The press, which is attached to the Democratic Party now, the American corporate media, they don't want to know, and they're not going to look into it. And in fact, if you look into it or I look into it, they're going to mock us. Oh, it's unverifiable. Oh, this couldn't possibly happen. Well, how do you know? You know, I watched the interview with 60 Minutes last night with the National Homeland Security guy who was in charge of making sure that foreign nations didn't intrude on the vote. Now, what the guy said was true. I believe that no nation injected itself into the machinery, the apparatus of our vote. But there was a sleight of hand in the whole presentation by 60 Minutes. And Scott Pelley, who I used to respect, I no longer do, he's got to know that that report was not upfront and honest, because the issue isn't whether Putin or China or Indonesia or Albania did something with our voting machines, Venezuela. That's not what the issue is. The issue is the mail-in voting. And what 60 Minutes did was say, because this guy, this Homeland Security guy, said the election was clean as far as foreign intrusion was concerned, that means the whole election was clean. No, it doesn't. The mail-in votes had nothing to do with foreign nations. And that guy doesn't know anything about the mail-in votes. And there wasn't even a question about them. It was, oh, because there wasn't any foreign intrusion, the election was clean. That's 60 Minutes. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute, hold it. Shouldn't you be investigating charges in Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin and Georgia? Shouldn't you be doing that? I believe you. I don't think that China or Russia interfered in our election, or Venezuela. Okay, so that's just one example of how you and I can't get the truth about this election. And then the other side, the pro-Trump side and the president himself, wants you to believe there was massive fraud. But when it comes to producing evidence of the massive fraud, well, we really don't have it yet. Yet, okay. I have an open mind on this, but don't expect any of the courts to rule in your favor without overwhelming evidence, not just a little evidence, not just some people blocking observers at polling places. That's not going to overturn an election. All right. Analytics is the key to all of this, and I said that from the very, very beginning. Analytics is math. So what are the odds that the President Trump has a 700,000 vote lead in Pennsylvania by midnight on election night, and then he loses by 60,000? What are the odds of that happening? I still don't know. All right? I have information, but I don't know that. I'd like to know that, wouldn't you? What the odds are there? That's called analytics. Now, if you could build a strong analytic case that this vote was off the chart crazy, that goes a long way to convincing we the people that there was fraud. Let's start with the facts. Here's what we know here at the No Spin News. So Joe Biden received a record number of votes, all right? 15 million more than Barack Obama received in 2012. 15 million more. That's a colossal jump, is it not? The black vote. Barack Obama got 93% of the black vote in 2012, all right? 13% of the total, of the entire vote was African American. All right, Joe Biden got 87%, 6% less than Barack Obama. All right? No incumbent president has ever lost an election in a century and a half, it's modern times, all right, gaining more votes in the second run. No president has ever lost when he gained more votes. Donald Trump gained 11 million more votes than he did in 2016. So in modern times, he's the only president to lose, gaining more votes than he did the first time around. 11 million, that's substantially more. 74 million votes. Joe Biden is the first president in 60 years since John F. Kennedy to lose Ohio and Florida and still win the presidency. Now that's an anomaly, okay, but it's interesting, and it goes into the analytic category. The Wall Street Journal, and that is one of the few corporate media that I believe is honest. The Journal independently analyzed 19 counties throughout the USA that had been right on their voting records over the past 40 years. So, for the past 40 years, 19 counties in this country have picked correctly. 19. 18 of them went for Trump. Only Clallam County in Washington State did not. Again, that's not evidence that overturns, but it's certainly curious. All right, so Donald Trump won 81% of the counties. 81%. Joe Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton in every major metro county around the country, except for Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, and Philadelphia, the counties that are suspect. Again, Joe Biden underperformed. Hillary Clinton did worse than she did in losing to Donald Trump, except for Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, and Philadelphia. That's pretty, wow. Is that a coincidence or what? Okay? Donald Trump earned the highest share of minority votes for Republicans since JFK, since 1960, Richard Nixon. Okay? So Trump outperformed all over the place. All over the place. Biden won only 17% of the counties, as I said. Okay? Where he won 524 counties, Joe Biden. Barack Obama won 873 counties. And Donald Trump won 2,534 counties. 5 times as many as Joe Biden. And the reason that Biden won was California. California, massive, massive Biden vote. And Detroit, that's Michigan. Milwaukee, that's Wisconsin. Philadelphia, that's Pennsylvania. And Atlanta, that's Georgia. Now, the circumstantial case I just laid out to you is impressive, to say the least. You would think that journalists would say, look into some of this. This doesn't really stack historically or any other way, does it? Now, I'm not a conspiratorialist. You know that. I'm not going to tell you it was massive fraud, even in my presentation of all of these facts. And I'll tell you why I'm not going to say that. There's something floating around, I get mail on it, all right, that says Pennsylvania mailed out 1.8 million votes, ballots, okay, for the mail-ins, 1.8 million, and got back 2.5 million ballots. So they mailed 1.8 out to people who wanted to mail in, and they got back 2.5. They got back 700,000 more ballots they mailed out. Everybody's, oh my God. Okay, well, here's the problem with that. That count ended October 19th. The vote was November 3rd. And it did not include Republican mail-in votes, just Democrats. So, right out the window. Now, I can't tell you how many millions of Trump supporters believe that stat. The stat's not true. Doesn't imply anything. You got to be very, very, very careful. Very careful. All right? Now, there is another thing, but I'm going to get to that with our guest in Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is really the focal point now because there are active lawsuits underway. And I must tell you, and I know many of you don't want to hear this, it would take a miracle for Donald Trump to remain as president. A miracle. Because the system is well on the way to inaugurating Joe Biden. And anybody who says differently is not telling you the truth. Because the system does not want to blow this election up. And I'll get into that in a little while. So let's go to Patrick Basham from Washington, D.C. He's the director of the Democracy Institute, and that is a think tank in Washington and London. It was founded in 2006. Mr. Basham is also a pollster, and he wrote a recent article that impressed me on November 27th. It was published in The Spectator, and it was called Reasons Why the 2020 Presidential Election is Deeply Puzzling. I think that's a good word, Mr. Basham, for what we found out. First of all, in my rundown of the facts about the election as we have been able to ascertain them here, did I make any mistakes?
No, I don't believe you did. It was quite a comprehensive overview.
Okay, so it's clean. What I stated is factual as far as you know. Now, in your article, you say, in 10 Pennsylvania counties, Joe Biden secured more votes than there were registered Democratic voters. Now, we tried to verify that. We could not verify it. Where'd you get that?
There are a number of reports, independent reports out, I think in memory serves within a week or so of the election, two or three at least, that found that I think some of them took 2 or 3 counties, others looked at 4 or 5 counties, and they found that Joe Biden's vote was, say 115% of registered Democrats in that county. And if you do the arithmetic, you put those counties, you add up the number of counties, you find that vote is surprising, right?
Well, 95%, according to exit polling, 95% of Republicans voted for Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. So it would be impossible for 10 Pennsylvania counties to override the 95 by that number. The problem here is that if it did happen, if 10 Pennsylvania counties had Joe Biden getting more votes than there were registered Democrats, that should have been presented in the Trump administration's lawsuits in Pennsylvania, and it was not.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't speak for why they choose to present the evidence they do or leave any evidence out. But it is a consistent fact, I believe, that in Pennsylvania and some other key states, that there were precincts and there were counties where Joe Biden either had a vote among Democrats that exceeded the number of registered Democrats, or, and I think as interesting and perhaps as important to the outcome, he had a result that was much, much higher than was expected and than would be the norm. It might be 15, 20 points higher among registered Democrats than you would have expected or that you would have found in neighboring comparable counties in demographic or partisan terms.
We know in Milwaukee and Detroit and Fulton County, Georgia and Philadelphia, that almost all the votes went to Biden, yet in the Democratic counties close by to those, they didn't. Most, the majority did, but not at that number. But I would like to know, I think the most important stat that we don't know yet, and maybe you know it, if you do, please let me know, is what is the ratio of Biden support from the day of the vote, people actually went to the poll, versus the mail-ins? So let's say that 70% of Democrats, the day of the vote, pulled it for Biden. and 95 in mail-ins voted for Biden. I'd like to know what the difference was, why in the Democratic precincts. If there was a difference, maybe it was flat, maybe it was the same. But we don't have that information. At least I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
I have not, no.
See, this is what drives me crazy about the Trump people. See, they have to go there into those kinds of situations and try to define it rather than saying, well, some of our observers were blocked in Philadelphia from looking at the ballots. I don't doubt that's true. But that's not going to be enough to overturn an election. No court in the world is going to say, oh, yeah, we'll have a recount or a new vote because, 5 guys were blocked. Nobody's going to do that. And the Trump people should know that.
May I push back gently on that last point about the observers and whether it could overturn the election? I mean, you may well be right that it isn't enough, but I assume the point the Trump people are going to make, and I assume they are going to claim they can demonstrate, is that happened in a sufficient number of precincts and counties where a large enough number of votes were counted during their absence, that comes to 6 figures, say, and that because no one knows, no one can prove that those votes weren't messed with because there was no independent observation, they'll argue you simply have to throw out all of the ballots that were counted during those periods in those locations. That may not carry the day with the court, but if that's their argument and they can back it up,
no, I mean,
legally, constitutionally, that is a sound argument.
But in Georgia, they hand recounted every vote, all right, and they found that Trump gained, I think, 2,000 votes and still lost. But the real fraud here, if it occurred in these massive mail-in ballots that all of a sudden showed up in the middle of the night, where Biden got 90% of them, 85% of them. That's where it is. Don't you agree, Mr. Basham?
I agree. I agree that is fundamentally where this should be decided, because all the evidence to direct and circumstantial and testimonial to date tells us that something very strange at a minimum occurred in multiple locations simultaneously, and that the numbers involved are more than sufficient to overturn this election if it was nefarious activity. No question about it.
And they have, I think it was in your article, I think you listed the precise times in the middle of the night where this massive flow came into Wayne County, that's Detroit, and Milwaukee and Philadelphia. And all of a sudden, Trump was ahead by, a substantial margin, and these votes just show up, yes. And they're all for Biden. Yes.
That's right. We had a situation in Georgia when the counts restarted. Each batch of votes, not only were they overwhelmingly for Biden, but the precise percentages of the Biden vote versus the Trump vote were identical in each subsequent batch until Biden found himself ahead in the tally. I mean, these, not as you suggested in your introduction, none of these incidents prove conclusively that there was fraud, but individually and cumulatively, they are beyond curious. I mean, they are beyond coincidental. Statistically, how does any of this happen?
Okay. So you and I both agree that analytics has to be pursued in order to basically point out to the American citizen, here's the mathematical odds of this happening, and it's like this. But it's not going to happen, unfortunately, because the press isn't going to do anything. You know that. I know that. Mm-hmm. They're not interested in it. The courts, their job isn't to investigate. Courts don't investigate. All right? Judges don't investigate. All they do is rule on what's handed to them. The individual states, obviously in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, are controlled by Democrats. They're not going to want to make their state look bad. So the only apparatus that could get to the truth would be the federal apparatus. And then Trump says yesterday in an interview that the feds aren't doing bump kissing. They're not looking into anything, according to the president. So we have no hope in ever finding out what happened, do we?
That's quite possible. I mean, if you were a betting person, you'd probably put your money on us never finding out for sure. I mean, that's the sad, frustrating reality that everyone who has an interest in this, a stake in this, is facing. It doesn't mean necessarily that Trump still cannot sort of pull this off, but he may not be able to pull it off in the short term in a legal or constitutional or judicial sense for the reasons you outlined.
Yeah, I just think it's impossible. Mr. Basham, thanks very much. You can read Patrick's article in The Spectator, and it caught my attention, so you might want to do that. All right, now one of the problems that we have in America, and I write about this in my upcoming book, Killing the Mob, is that we'll accept a certain amount of corruption here. The government the swamp will accept it. I mean, Nixon beat Kennedy in 1960. Kennedy lost. And when you read how organized crime inserted itself into the 1960 presidential election. Well, that was never investigated because the press loved JFK. And we never got to the bottom of it. I give you some pretty heavy-duty information, but it was never adjudicated in a court of law. So that's what's going to happen here. So the Supreme Court, they're waiting. I think they'll hear the Pennsylvania case. But just like, and I'm going to get to this in a little while, the Bush-Gore thing in Florida, they're going to say, it's too late. We can't overturn an election. All right, so there are lawsuits in play, and the big one is Republican Party of Pennsylvania versus Bachvar. She is the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania. And this is the mail-in, over the mail-in ballots, that they were handled in an illegal way in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I think the Supreme Court is going to have to take a look at that. The other